It was supposed to be just another quiet goodbye, until Elvis blocked the doorway and said 5 words that froze Priscilla where she stood. August 1973. Inside Graceland's blue bedroom, he looked her straight in the eyes and revealed a truth he'd hidden since the day they met. August 13, 1973, the last summer Elvis and Priscilla would ever live under the same roof. Memphis was drenched in heat that night. The air outside Graceland clung to the windows like fog. Fans waited beyond the gates, humming his songs under flickering streetlights, never knowing what was unfolding inside. Upstairs, the clock read 11:42 p.m. The blue bedroom glowed faintly in the light of a single lamp. Priscilla stood by the dresser, hands trembling as she closed the last clasp on her suitcase. Across the room, Elvis sat motionless on the piano bench. His white robe hung open, his hair damp, his eyes fixed on her reflection in the mirror. Neither of them spoke. She finally broke the silence. "I'm not angry anymore, Elvis. I'm just done." Her voice didn't rise. It was the kind of calm that comes after too many storms. He looked down at the floor, then up again. "Scylla?" The word came out soft, like a prayer. She reached for the doorknob. The sound of her suitcase wheels scraping the carpet filled the room. And then his voice cut through everything. "Scylla, don't walk out that door." The air froze. She turned slowly. Elvis was standing now, his hand gripping the doorframe. For the first time that night, she saw fear in his eyes. Not the anger she expected, but real fear. "Elvis, please," she whispered. "We've already said everything there is to say." He shook his head. "No, we haven't. You think I'm scared of being alone? I'm scared of not hearing you breathe in this house." For a moment, neither moved. The ceiling fan hummed softly overhead, pushing the scent of his cologne through the still air. Down the hall, Lisa Marie's bedroom light glowed beneath the door, a reminder that part of their love would always live here. "Elvis," Priscilla said gently, "you'll be fine. You have the stage, the fans, everything you ever wanted." He gave a quiet, broken laugh. "That's what they think. They see the king. They don't see the man who's dying every night when the lights go out." She closed her eyes, trying not to cry. "You chose that life." "I did," he said, "but I never chose to lose you." Outside, thunder rumbled low, rolling over the Mississippi River. It felt like the sky itself was warning them that something final was coming. Elvis stepped forward, close enough for her to see the tremor in his hands. "Scylla, do you ever think about before all this? Before Graceland? Before the cameras?" She swallowed. "Every day." He nodded slowly. "So do I." For a moment, they were both silent again. Two ghosts trapped in the same house, haunted by the same memories. "I can't keep pretending," she said. "The man I fell in love with, he's gone." His voice cracked. "Then let me find him again. Just don't go tonight." Lightning flashed through the window, reflecting in his eyes. The truth was written there. He wasn't trying to control her. He was begging her to stay long enough for him to say the words he'd buried for years. Priscilla looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the icon, not the legend, but the man who still called her darling in letters when no one was looking. "Elvis," she began, but stopped. The lump in her throat was too heavy to speak through. He whispered, "If you walk out now, I'll never tell you what I should have told you a long time ago." She hesitated, hand still on the doorknob. The storm outside cracked like a whip. "What is it you think I don't know?" she asked quietly. Elvis stared at her, breathing unevenly. "That I never learned how to stop loving you." Her suitcase slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The sound echoed through Graceland like the closing of a chapter neither was ready to end. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain began to fall harder, tapping against the windows in rhythm with their silence. He took a single step closer. "Please, Scylla, just sit with me a little longer. Let me explain what you've never heard from me. Not the singer, not the star. From me." She looked down at her hands, at the ring she still wore, then back at him. "All right," she whispered, "but only for a little while." The thunder rolled again as she turned away from the door and followed him toward the dim glow of the living room lamp. Whatever she was about to hear, she knew it would change the way she remembered him forever. The air in Graceland felt different now, heavier, almost electric. Elvis stood between Priscilla and the hallway like a man guarding more than a door. The lamplight carved shadows across his face, highlighting every sleepless line beneath his eyes. The house was silent except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock down the hall. Priscilla stared at him, her heart pounding. "You can't keep doing this," she said softly. "You can't keep trapping yourself inside this house, or me inside it with you." Elvis didn't answer right away. He was staring at the floor, his bare feet on the cool marble tiles, as if the right words might be hiding there. Then, without looking up, he said, "You think I'm scared of losing fans, Scylla? I'm scared of losing my family." The sentence hit her harder than she expected. He looked up, and for a second she saw the same young man who once took her hand at a fairground in Germany, years before the headlines and the gold records. His voice softened. "You once told me love means knowing when to let go. I never learned how." Thunder rumbled outside again. It was a lonely sound, echoing through the walls of the mansion. Priscilla crossed her arms. "You can't fix what's already broken." He took a step closer. "Then tell me why it broke." She sighed. "Because you built your world around the stage. Around applause. There's no room left for me in it." He smiled sadly. "That applause doesn't sound like you think it does, darling. It's just noise. When the curtain falls, the silence gets so loud it eats me alive." He reached into his pocket, his hand shaking, and pulled out a small photograph. The two of them laughing by the Graceland pool, long before the world called him the king. The edges of the photo were torn and creased from being carried too long. He opened his palm. "Tell me this means nothing." Priscilla froze. The picture felt like a ghost, a memory made of paper. "Elvis?" she whispered, but he pressed on. "I used to look at this before every show. Reminded me why I started singing in the first place. Not for fame. For you." The rain outside picked up, drumming against the windows like a heartbeat. She took a slow breath. "You're remembering the man you wanted to be, not the one you became." He gave a faint, broken laugh. "Maybe. But maybe the man I became still remembers the one who loved you." Lightning flashed, and for an instant, the room seemed frozen in white light. The two of them facing each other like reflections trapped in time. She whispered, "Elvis, it's over." He shook his head. "No, it's unfinished." His voice was low, trembling with something raw and unguarded. "I keep thinking about all the songs I sang to strangers. Love Me Tender, always on my mind. They weren't for them, Scylla. They were for you. Every word." She turned her face away. "Then why did it feel like I was the only one who couldn't hear them?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the window, rainlight flickering across his profile. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost of the boy from Tupelo who had once promised her forever. "I never stopped writing to you," he said quietly. "Even after we stopped talking." Priscilla frowned. "Writing?" He nodded. "Letters. Notes. Never sent them. They're in the drawer by the piano. Every time I messed up, I wrote what I should have said out loud." Her throat tightened. "And what did you say?" He turned around slowly. "That I loved you, and that I didn't know how to be both Elvis Presley and your husband at the same time." The thunder rolled again, shaking the glass. Priscilla's eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. "You can't keep apologizing through songs and letters, Elvis. Not anymore." He looked down at the photograph again, thumb brushing the faded corner. "Then just tell me this meant nothing. Say it and I'll let you go." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She couldn't lie. The silence stretched between them, heavy, trembling, alive. Finally, she said in a whisper, "It meant everything. That's why I have to go." He blinked hard, his jaw tightening. "Then I guess love's a cruel thing, ain't it?" Priscilla turned toward the door again, but his voice stopped her one more time. "Wait." She looked back. His hand was shaking, holding the photograph like something sacred. "There's something else you don't know," he said, voice breaking. She frowned. "What is it?" Elvis stared at her for a long moment, the stormlight flickering behind him. The song you heard on the radio last week. Always on my mind. She nodded slowly. He swallowed. I didn't write that for the fans. I wrote it for you. Her eyes widened. The truth hit harder than any argument. Elvis stepped aside, the doorway now open. If you still want to leave, I won't stop you. But before you go, you deserve to hear everything. The rain outside slowed to a whisper as Priscilla stood there, her hands still on the suitcase handle. Realizing this was no longer just a goodbye, it was a confession years in the making. The house had gone quiet again, the kind of quiet that hums just before someone says something that will change everything. Elvis stood by the window, arms crossed, his reflection fractured by raindrops sliding down the glass. The lightning outside threw flashes of blue and white across the room, making him look like a man caught between two worlds, the icon and the human beneath it. Priscilla sat on the edge of the couch, her suitcase forgotten by the door. Her voice was barely above a whisper. What did you mean when you said you wrote that song for me? Elvis didn't turn around. You want to know why I kept you here so long, Scylla? She waited. Because I'm terrified of who I am when you're gone. He turned then, his face pale, eyes tired but fierce. Everyone thinks I'm surrounded by people all the time. Fans, friends, women. But none of them know me. They know Elvis Presley. Not the boy from Tupelo who just wanted to be seen. He walked to the piano and placed a hand on the keys, pressing one gently. The note hung in the air. You were the only one who ever saw me before the rest of the world did. Priscilla felt her chest tighten. You can't hold me hostage with guilt, Elvis. That's not love. He shook his head. This isn't guilt. This is truth. From the top drawer of the piano, he pulled out a folded sheet of paper, edges worn soft. I wrote this letter a month ago, when you filed for divorce. His voice faltered. I didn't send it because I didn't want you to see me weak. He unfolded it carefully and began to read, voice trembling. If I could change, I would. If I could be the man you needed instead of the man everyone else wanted, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But I don't know how to stop being Elvis long enough to be myself. He lowered the page, his eyes glistening. That's what the song meant. Every word of it was a confession. I wasn't singing to the crowd. I was singing to you. Priscilla pressed her hand against her mouth, her heart breaking all over again. Elvis? He looked up at her, searching her face. The pills, the tours, the late nights. I told everyone it was exhaustion, but that was a lie. It was loneliness. You ever been surrounded by thousands of people and still feel invisible? Her voice cracked. Yes. He gave a faint, knowing smile. Then you understand. He turned the page of his letter over, showing her another line scrawled across the back. I wrote this after our last fight in Palm Springs. He read it aloud. The crowd loves me, but the man they love ain't real. The man who loves her is. She felt tears sting her eyes. The weight of years pressed between them. The missed chances, the swallowed words, the nights apart. Elvis, you can't keep punishing yourself, she said. He laughed softly, bitterly. Punishment would mean I stopped caring. I never did. I just didn't know how to show it without breaking everything I touched. He dropped into the piano chair, rubbing his temples. When I was a kid, I prayed for the world to notice me. I didn't realize what I was asking for. Fame isn't light, Scylla. It's fire. It burns everything close enough to touch it. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain had eased into a whisper. She looked at him, the man who had once sung her to sleep, who now looked like he hadn't slept in days. Elvis, she said softly, I wanted to stay, but I needed you to meet me halfway. He looked up sharply, pain flashing across his face. You think I didn't want to? Every night on stage I thought about coming home. But when the spotlight's on you long enough, you start to forget what darkness feels like. He rose slowly from the chair and walked toward her. His voice dropped low. You think I loved the fame, but the truth is, I loved you more. I just didn't know how to be the man who deserved you. He stopped in front of her, close enough for her to feel the heat from his skin. That's my confession, Scylla. I ruined us because I didn't know how to love you without turning it into a performance. Her lips trembled. And what happens now? He took a shaky breath. Now you go. But you'll know the truth before you do. She looked into his eyes and saw the boy he used to be, nervous, sincere, scared to be forgotten. Why are you telling me this tonight? He turned his face toward the window. Because I don't think I'll get another chance. Her heart stopped for a beat. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. His fingers brushed against the ring she still wore. I've been feeling it for a while now, something closing in. Maybe it's all the years I spent trying to be someone else. Maybe it's just time catching up. She shook her head. Don't say that. He smiled faintly. You can't outrun yourself forever, darling. The music stops for everyone eventually. Lightning flared again, lighting the side of his face. The same face that millions of fans adored, now stripped of glamour, just a man admitting defeat. Elvis, she whispered, please don't talk like this. He reached for her hand, his grip warm, fragile. There's more I haven't told you. She frowned. What more could there be? He leaned closer, voice trembling like a confession too heavy to hold. You remember that night you said you wished I'd write a song just for you? One no one else would ever hear? She nodded. He stepped toward the piano again, his eyes wet. I did. I recorded it. One take, no lights, no audience. Just me. Priscilla's breath caught. What song? He smiled softly, almost shyly. It's called The One That Stayed. It's locked in the drawer under the tapes. You'll find it someday. The rain had stopped now, leaving only the low hiss of wind against the windows. He turned back toward her, the weight gone from his shoulders. I just needed you to know the truth before you go. That's all. She stared at him, heart torn between past and present. You think telling me this will make it easier to leave? He shook his head. No, but maybe it'll make it harder to forget. For a long, fragile moment, neither moved. Then he whispered the line that would follow her out the door and into the rest of her life. There's something else you don't know, Scylla. Her voice trembled. What's that? He looked at her with that same boyish half-smile he'd had the first night they met. You never really left. The room fell silent, the confession hanging in the air like a prayer too late to change, but too powerful to ignore. The rain outside turned steady again, soft enough to sound like whispering. Elvis sat back down, his robe shifting slightly as he opened the drawer beside the bed. From it, he pulled a small velvet box wrapped in an old lyric sheet. The edges were torn, the paper yellowed with time. Priscilla watched in silence. Elvis turned the box in his hand before setting it gently on the piano lid. You recognize this? He asked. She nodded slowly. My ring. He gave a faint, tired smile. The same one I gave you in Vegas, May 67. I kept it here because I couldn't bring myself to let it go. Every time I tried, something stopped me. He unfolded the lyric sheet wrapped around the box. Ink bled through in smudges of blue and black. She could make out bits of the words. Can't help. Still remember. Always you. Elvis, what is this? He looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. The song I never finished. The one I couldn't bury. He took a breath, his hands trembling slightly. You think I wrote for the crowds, but most of those songs, they were letters. Prayers I couldn't say to you face to face. He smoothed the paper on the piano and began to hum a few bars. The melody was fragile, like a secret being told for the first time. Every night I sang to thousands, he said, eyes far away. Women screamed, men cheered, but not one of them heard what I was really saying. He turned back to her. Every time I sang Love Me Tender, I saw your face in the front row, even when you weren't there. His voice cracked on the last word. Priscilla felt her own tears spill, quiet and unstoppable. Elvis, he shook his head gently. You don't have to say anything. Just let me finish. He touched the ring box again. I told everyone I'd moved on. The truth is, I kept that ring close because it reminded me there was once a time when I wasn't a stranger to myself. Lightning flashed outside, washing the room in brief white light. For a moment, he looked like the man she'd met long ago. The one who used to sneak out of rehearsals just to sit on the porch with her and talk about ordinary things. "Elvis, you don't owe me this," she said softly. "We both made mistakes." He gave a quiet laugh that sounded more like a sigh. "Maybe, but mine cost us everything." He turned back to the piano, pressing a few uneven keys. The notes wavered but held. "You ever stand on stage in front of 14,000 people and feel completely alone?" She shook her head. He looked up. "It's the loneliest sound in the world. The crowd roars, but you can't hear any of it. You just keep pretending." "That's what I did for years. Pretended I was fine." He stopped playing. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. Priscilla wiped her eyes. "So what now, Elvis? You confess? And everything just disappears?" He smiled faintly. "No. But maybe it stops haunting me." He reached out and handed her the ring box. "You know what hurts the most?" he said. "Not losing you. It's knowing you saw the real me once, and I buried him under the fame." Her fingers brushed against his as she took the box. Felt heavier than she remembered. Inside, the ring gleamed faintly in the lamplight, reflecting both their faces. "Elvis," she whispered, "you could have told me this years ago." He looked down. "I know. I thought time would make it easier. Didn't. It just built walls between us." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You ever love someone so much you start resenting them because they remind you who you used to be?" Priscilla didn't answer. She didn't have to. He faced her again. Every woman they wrote about in the papers, every rumor, none of them mattered. I was just chasing distractions. Because being with anyone else was easier than facing what I'd done to you. He walked toward the window, rain streaking down the glass like tears. I was the loneliest man in every crowded room. She stood, her voice trembling. "Then why keep performing?" He gave a sad smile. "Because if I stopped singing, I'd have to listen to my own silence." The line hung in the air, heavy as the rain outside. He turned back, eyes glistening. "You were the only person who ever saw me before the world did, Scylla. Before the crown, before the spotlight. You saw the boy who just wanted to sing his mama a song." Priscilla swallowed hard. "I still see him." His breath caught. "Then maybe there's still something left of him to save." She stepped closer, but he lifted a hand. Not to stop her, but to steady himself. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "I just needed you to know the truth before you left. Because once you walk out that door, I'll finally have to face who I am without you." A deep silence filled the room. The clock ticked. The rain softened. She looked down at the ring box in her hand, the weight of all their years inside it. "I don't know if I can stay," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Then go if you need to. Just remember, you were the only thing in my life that was ever real." Thunder rolled once more, echoing across the walls of Graceland. And as the sound faded, so did the last barrier between them. For the first time in years, Priscilla saw Elvis not as a legend, but as a man finally telling the truth he couldn't bury any longer. The storm had passed, but the air around Graceland was still heavy with the smell of rain. It was past 2 in the morning. The lamps burned low, casting amber light across the blue bedroom walls where hours earlier, everything had almost ended. Elvis leaned against the doorway now, his robe half open, his breathing shallow. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a single night. Priscilla stood a few feet away, the suitcase she had packed still waiting by the door, the same door she hadn't managed to walk through. The silence between them was deeper than any argument they had ever had. It wasn't anger anymore. It was sorrow, quiet, tired, human. Elvis finally spoke. "You can go if you need to." His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed him. "But don't think for a second I ever stopped loving you." Priscilla felt the air leave her lungs. She had heard him sing those words 1,000 times in 1,000 songs. But tonight they didn't sound like lyrics. They sounded like truth. "Elvis," she whispered, "love isn't always enough." He nodded slowly. "I know, but it's all I ever had that was real." He walked to the piano and sat down again, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the keys. A few soft notes filled the room, hesitant, unfinished, like a goodbye he didn't want to say out loud. "This place feels empty without you," he murmured. "It ain't the same house when you're gone." She looked around the room, the framed photographs, the trophies, the gold records, the life that had consumed them both. "You filled every wall with your music," she said. "There wasn't room for anything else." He smiled faintly, eyes still on the piano. "I guess I thought if I played loud enough, I could drown out the sound of us breaking." Priscilla moved closer. "You don't need to drown it out anymore." He turned toward her. The exhaustion in his face was unmistakable, but beneath it was something softer, a peace she hadn't seen in years. "Scylla," he said quietly, "you remember the night Lisa was born?" She nodded, smiling through tears. "You wouldn't stop crying." He laughed under his breath. "I wasn't crying. I was just scared I'd mess it up." "You didn't," she said. He looked down at his hands. "Then tell me why it feels like I did." She took a deep breath. "Because you tried to love the whole world, Elvis. And somewhere along the way you forgot you didn't have to save everyone. You just had to be here." He swallowed hard, words caught in his throat. "I was always scared that if I stopped moving, people would stop caring." "They wouldn't," she said. "They loved you. I loved you." He looked up, and for a moment, the tiredness in his face disappeared. "Then maybe that's enough," he said softly. He reached for the old ring box on the piano, opened it, and stared at the gold band glinting under the lamplight. "Do you want it back?" Priscilla shook her head. "No. That was never about jewelry. It was a promise. And we already kept the part that mattered." He smiled faintly, closing the box. "You always were the better half of this story." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed twice. Elvis leaned back on the piano bench, his gaze unfocused, as if watching old memories flicker like film reels on the walls. "I used to think love was something you could win," he said. "You sing the right song, you give enough, people stay." He paused. "But it doesn't work like that, does it?" She shook her head. "No, it doesn't. Sometimes loving someone means knowing when to stop trying to fix what was never broken, just changed." He took a slow breath. "So this is it, then?" Priscilla nodded. "It's not the end. It's just time." He stood, walked to her, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then, without warning, he pulled her into his arms. The hug wasn't dramatic. It wasn't movie perfect. It was quiet, the kind of embrace that carries every apology words could never fix. She could feel his heart pounding against her chest. "You'll be okay," she whispered. He nodded but didn't let go. "Promise me something, Scylla." "What?" "When people talk about us, when they tell our story, don't let them turn it into a tragedy." She blinked back tears. "What do you want it to be?" "A lesson," he said. "That love doesn't fail when it ends. It fails when it never gets told." She smiled faintly. "Then we didn't fail." He finally released her, stepping back. His eyes shimmered, reflecting the soft glow of the lamp. "You'll always have a place here. Graceland was never mine alone." Priscilla reached for the suitcase, but before she picked it up, she turned one last time. "Goodbye, Elvis." He smiled. "There's no goodbye, darlin'. Just the space between songs." She hesitated, then left the suitcase by the door. Without a word, she walked down the hall, her footsteps fading into the echo of memories. Elvis stood there, motionless. He watched the door until it disappeared behind her, until the silence became something sacred. In the morning, she would be gone. But on the piano, beside the ring box and the unfinished lyric sheet, she would leave a single note. "You don't have to sing louder. I already heard you." When he found it hours later, he smiled, tired, tearful, and grateful. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Because sometimes, even after goodbye, love stays, frozen in the spaces between words, between songs, between hearts that once beat together. And for Elvis, that was enough. Weeks later, the gates of Graceland were lined with fans again. They brought roses, letters, Polaroids, unaware that just upstairs, The echoes of one night still lingered in the walls. Elvis had gone back on tour. Nashville, September 10th, 1973. 14,000 people filled the municipal auditorium. The air buzzed like electricity. Flashbulbs flickered. The crowd's chant of Elvis, Elvis, rose and fell like waves. Backstage, he was quiet. No jokes. No small talk. Only the faint hum of his voice warming up to a song that had once been meant for one person alone. When the lights dimmed, he walked out slowly, head bowed, hands trembling around the microphone. The band began the gentle opening chords of Always on My Mind. Halfway through the first verse, something cracked inside him. His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. He closed his eyes and whispered into the mic, "Scylla, this one's still yours." The audience thought it was ad-libbed stage banter. They cheered. But behind the applause, Joe Esposito noticed tears running down his friend's face. The king of rock and roll, the man who had faced arenas, presidents, and critics, was crying in front of 14,000 strangers. The band fell silent for a moment. All that remained was his raw voice echoing through the hall. People in the front rows later said the air felt heavy, as if everyone there had unknowingly stepped into someone's farewell. After the show, Elvis sat alone in the dressing room, a towel over his head. He looked at Joe and said, "She heard me tonight. I know she did." He was right. Back in Los Angeles, Priscilla had been watching a taped broadcast of the concert. When he whispered her name, she froze. The same 5 words that had stopped her weeks earlier, "Scylla, don't walk out that door," came rushing back. Only this time they sounded different. They sounded like peace. She turned off the television and stared at the quiet room. The city lights flickered through the blinds like a pulse. She picked up the note she'd left on his piano, the one he'd returned to her in the mail, folded once, untouched except for a new line he'd added at the bottom. "And I never stopped singing." She smiled through tears. "No, you didn't," she whispered. Years later, long after the world had moved on and Elvis had become myth, Priscilla opened a foundation in his name, the Elvis Legacy Foundation. Its mission: to help musicians fighting loneliness and addiction. On the wall behind her desk hung a plaque engraved with his own words, "Even kings can't command hearts." Every August, she returned to Memphis. Graceland became a sea of candles. Tourists walked quietly through the music room where their last conversation had ended. Most never noticed the tiny frame on the piano. A photo of the two of them laughing by the pool, edges faded from time. Sometimes she'd wait until the crowd left, then sit alone at that piano. She'd play the same unfinished melody he'd once hummed for her, the song he could never bury. In those moments, she swore she could feel him near. Not the superstar, not the myth, but the man who had finally told her the truth. Because love, she realized, doesn't vanish when you leave. It changes shape, follows you quietly, waits in the corners of old songs and letters. Elvis Presley's greatest performance was never on stage. It was that night in Graceland, when he chose honesty over image, and let the world's loudest man speak softly for the first time. And in the end, that was his final gift. Because even kings can't command hearts, but they can set them free. If the story moved you, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Behind every legend is a truth the world never heard, and sometimes it takes losing everything to find what was real all along. Have you ever heard a song that felt like it was written just for you? Tell us below, because every story deserves to be heard.